Now that I've got a dolly animated and we go in to see the ticket booth, we can look at another camera and animate a zoom. We want to think of these as a way of telling a story. We've walked in and maybe there's somebody from a different point of view sneaking up on us, or somebody else is looking over in our direction because they heard us. I'll switch cameras by clicking on Shot 1 and choosing Cameras, Shot 2. Instead of doing a zoom in on the face like this, where I had illustrated a close-up, I'm going to go look at one of the seats. First, I'll get this camera in position. Let's say, for instance, that this camera actually needs to start out looking towards the ticket booth. We're starting out with our backs to the windows and looking over the seating. I want to make sure that I don't look down those tunnels too much, as there's not much more modeled beyond that basic box. I'll pull that back. This looks pretty good. Maybe a low perspective, and we'll rise up and zoom in. I'll start out here, and I've got a good draw in where the line here on the third point is through the column on that ticket booth. I'll make sure I've got it fairly well centered and grounded. I'm also watching out for tangents, things like this, where that canopy frame is just on the edge of the frame and can't decide whether to be in or out. It's either out and we're very low, or it's down and in the frame and we're a little bit higher up. It's up to you how to frame it, but we want to avoid having, for example, poles sticking out of people's heads and roofs that lay perfectly on the edge of the frame. Now for that shot. I'm going to switch away from the storyboard as I realized it wasn't quite keeping with the continuity. I want to face in the same direction so the audience has a visual clue as to where they are. It's okay to vary away from those boards if it makes for a better shot. And a lot of times, once we hit 3D, we find that the storyboard is a nice to have that we tend to flex a little bit. Now for the animation. I'll make sure I select the camera. Choosing on Shot 2, select Camera. It starts out on a 50mm lens, and I'm going to open that up a little bit to a 35, so we pull farther back. Then I'll dolly that in, and I'm ready for my zoom. I'm going to operate in the same space here, the same time, those 192 frames. Here's where I am for reference. I'll show in a top view in a wireframe that camera. So I'm kind of back in the corner, about one bay in. There's my original shot, and looking towards that ticket booth and the clock. I think I'll crane up and look at the clock because suddenly it's time for a train. I'll press C for camera and F3 for shaded. First, I'll turn on auto key by pressing N, and I'll get this shot animated. First, I'll crane up and look at the camera, scrubbing over to maybe frame 72 or so, about 3 seconds in. I'll click the mouse wheel in and hold Shift to pan up, and then use the Orbit tool and rotate. Alternately, if not the Orbit tool, we can use the pan. I'll pan this up and look at the clock. So far, this is pretty good. We start low, crane up, and pan to focus on the clock. And now I'll add the zoom in. I'll say after we've panned up, we also zoom in to notice that it's 3 o'clock. And here's how we do this. I'll change this focal length here from 35 up to 50. And we can see on the small sliders, the arrows on the right here, that there's little red brackets around it, meaning that that property is animated. Now when I go back to frame 0, my lens is 35 and my field of view is that 53. But as I scrub forward on the timeline to notice the time, here 3 seconds in, lining up on the third lines is my clock, and I'm at a lens of 50 and a field of view of 38 and plus. That's how we animate a zoom, and we can use it in conjunction with other things. What I may also want to do is just fix the pan on this a little bit, panning down and craning up to see it. It's okay to come in and adjust. It's still keying it right on that key. And there I am noticing the time. I'll turn off auto key, go back, and play it. Maybe we heard a bell, signifying a train approaching, or something similar, and we glanced up at the clock, realizing we were going to be late. We can keep working on it, refining that zoom, adding other things to it, or maybe yet another camera to switch to tell our story in the train station. Now with my cameras in place, I'll look at rendering in the next video, and actually getting a movie out of this scene.